If you were following along with me in the previous lesson, you heard me say that the interactive distortion tool was probably my favorite of all the interactive tools. And that may be true, although this next one is the one I use most often, the interactive drop shadow tool. This allows you to take an object or text and create a three-dimensional effect by raising it off the page, creating a shadow in the background or a perspective shadow, or even creating a glow around the outside using a different setting from the property bar. We're going to look at those options using the same file we've been working with throughout this chapter, interactivetools1.cdr. So if you've been following along, you can just click on page 5 down here at the bottom. And if you've jumped to this lesson and you've got the exercise files and you'd like to follow along, go to the Lesson 11 folder to open this one up before clicking on page 5. So here's our star that we worked with in the previous lesson. Now we're going to do something different with it though. We're going to apply a drop shadow. So let's click on the star, make sure it's selected, and let's go over to our interactive tools. Last one we used was a distortion tool, so I'm going to click and hold that down and move past distort down to drop shadow. And when I click on this, it is an interactive tool, so now it's just a matter of clicking and dragging. So I'm going to click and drag from the center out in the direction that I want the shadow to go. So for example, if I want it to go down and to the right, you can see there's an outline when I get out here, and where I let go will determine where the shadow falls. So I'm going to let go right here, and we'll examine the defaults. First of all, you can see it's going from light to dark. So it's creating shades of gray in the background. And you can see that from my property bar, there's a transparency in that shadow. So if there's something in behind it, I'd actually be able to see that object. The transparency is represented here by the wine glass and the value of 50. So 50% opacity. There's also feathering to make it look natural. You can see it's not a jagged or sharp line. It's actually got some feathering, and we can increase or decrease that feathering using this slider or by entering values. So let's just try doing the interactive method by clicking and dragging. If I want to change the direction, I can do that just by dragging this around. I want it further off the page, I drag it further away from the object. Want it to seem close, drag it up closer. I've also got the slider here. When I move the slider down towards the black, it gets darker. And you can see the transparency up here has just gone up to 75. If I go towards the center, it gets a little bit lighter, down to 25. And I'm going to leave it up there at about 42. That looks good. Now watch what happens when I click and drag this black box into the center and let go. I've now created a different effect. You can see that it's actually got shading around the outside, and this is called a glow. I want to show you some of the presets. If I go up to my property bar and click the preset drop down, you can see we've got flat bottom left. And as I hover over these, I see a little preview in the right there using our circle. So we experimented with flat drop shadows, but now we get into the glows where the shadow is actually going around the outside of the object. And that's what we achieve by putting those two color swatches one on top of the other. A medium glow, not quite as exaggerated. We've also got perspectives to choose from. I'm going to try this perspective bottom left. Give it a click. You can see how that's applied and creates a perspective shadow, almost as if the light's coming from behind on the right-hand side. I've also got a slider down here. I can hardly see it. So I'm going to go back up here to a flat bottom left, give that a click, and show you how to apply the perspective. If I move this center point down to a tip, you can see I'm getting a perspective now. I'm going to go down to the bottom, and I'm going to have to scroll down because I can't see the slider. There it is. I can bring that back in to adjust the perspective. I can use the slider to increase or decrease the transparency. I think I'd like it to be a little bit lighter. And there we go. I can change the direction, and that is a perspective. So let's try that now. I'm going to hold down my F4 key on the keyboard just so I can see all of the objects on my page. Let's try it with some text. So I'm going to click on the text first, even though I've still got my drop shadow tool selected. I can click and drag from the center of the text to create that flat shadow, brings the text off the page. I'm going to zoom into that area a little bit more with my zoom tool. There we go, just so you can see the effects. Go back to my drop shadow. I'm going to bring that back right on top to see the glow. Let's drag that down But let's drag our center point here, the white, down to the bottom to create our perspective. You can see now it looks like light is coming from behind my text. So it works equally as well with our artistic text as it does with objects on our page. Shift F4 zooms us out to see the entire page. I'm going to go back to my pick tool, give it a click to see the end result. So very cool stuff you can do, creating a three-dimensional and lighting effects using the interactive drop shadow tool.